you're probably at work. You think, God, these PowerPoints are so exciting. I wish that I could watch a podcast where there's a PowerPoint. Let's fucking go.
Let's go. We are upgraded
All right,
podcast
we're
technology.
moving to the first ever lemonade stand presentation
future.
angle. All right, time for classroom. So what I was interested in is obviously everybody's talking about AI and how it's going to steal a bunch of jobs or that it's going to make the future incredible, and everybody's kind of all over the place on this. What I thought would be interesting as we try to understand what AI is going to do is to look at some of the recent technological waves and what they did for job creation and destruction, right? Because it's really easy to be like, oh, AI is going to destroy X, Y, and Z job, which is true. It's going to destroy a shitload, but it's going to create a lot, presumably. And so I thought it'd be interesting to specifically look at real numbers of previous technological waves, like personal computing. So this happened starting in the 80s, let's say, and obviously has continued till now. So personal computing destroyed a lot of jobs. Turns out there's a lot of people who worked on typewriters. Those don't really exist anymore. Lost like 100,000 jobs. Typesetting for people who didn't read old newspapers and stuff. You had to manually put like type and print and font stuff to make things, right? Because you didn't just print it.
Brandon, you're probably like super familiar with
Dude,
that.
I was just gonna say, don't make a boomer joke. It's funny because I watched a movie from '93 yesterday, and one of the main plot points is this woman trying to get a job as a typist, and like, there's a whole office of people just typing up things other people telling her. It's crazy.
And that's not even what this is. You know, in Microsoft Word, how you can change 2 words or 2 letters and it's just changed. You had to physically do that for the entire world operating before a few decades ago, right? Yeah. So that's not even the same as a giant amount of people who lost work. Clerical and secretarial work. There's 3 to 4 million people in the US who just did what you're describing, just typing, putting in numbers, spreadsheets, because this is all done by hand. If you think of all the finances and all the accounting and all the paperwork of every company in the world, they were writing all this by hand. Bookkeeping, accountants, hundreds of thousands are lost due to spreadsheets and all the different software that PCs introduced, right? Yeah. Office equipment manufacturers, we lose tons of that because now all this is consolidated into a computer. Yeah. So we lose a ton of jobs, right? Based on personal computers. And probably a lot of people were really upset and scared at that time. But obviously computers have generated an obscene amount of new jobs. Programmers alone, there's 28 million globally, approximately. These are estimated numbers from like, Labor Bureau, but it's 28 million globally apparently are working as programmers right now.
28 million people to send to the farms.
Yeah, we can get
given how annoying
nature.
Programmers are on Reddit, this is the biggest mistake we've ever made.
So some of these, it's a mix of whether we have numbers to the US or globally. PC and parts manufacturing, millions of people globally, hundreds of thousands just in the US alone of like good jobs of people making parts. And if you think about the actual PC itself and all the chips and all the peripherals and all the sales distribution that goes into all the different PCs, all the different equipment, IT and networking, hundreds of thousands.
Did you guys know I used to solder the chips themselves when I worked at NVIDIA? Like they would send me the parts and I would go in my garage and I would
because we didn't have computers then. and so the chips were made by hand.
Yeah, it was actually an American-made operation, and I wasn't very fast with them. That's why there were shortages.
That's
but
beautiful.
I did a really good job.
And then they outsourced your job to Taiwan, and that's why you became a streamer.
That's the story, folks.
Freed you up for creative work, as they say. Video game industry. Remember, that didn't exist when you were a kid, Brendan.
Hey, dude.
There's 500,000 people who have a job working in the video game industry. Right. This is crazy. We just take for granted that these things exist, but these didn't even exist. Same with manufacturing support. If you think about the amount of technicians, sales, distribution, I mean, just Apple stores alone, right? All of these things are based off of this industry that did not exist. The internet comes in. Internet's even crazier, right? Retail stores. Now let's look at what the internet has destroyed, right? Retail stores are super bad, right? We're looking at least 700,000 jobs in the US, obviously millions globally, as essentially physical stores get totally fucked.
Malls get wiped out.
And so this is, I think, more so than the computing one. This is a real, like, we've all seen and felt this, and it's sad. This is not a fun thing, right? And this is now. It's going to continue,
Unless you're Spirit Halloween, because then you're getting a lot of free.
Unless you're Spirit Halloween. Newspaper and media. Over half of the people working in newspapers and like news update media lost their jobs globally over the past few decades thanks to the internet.
We have podcasters now.
We do, as we'll bring up later. Turns out there used to be way, way more travel agents, and you don't need that if you can just look up what you want to do on the internet. Hundreds of thousands lost. Brokers, financial advisors, lots of people where the internet essentially just invalidated their job.
Can I just say something? Sorry.
Yeah.
Both my dad has worked in the military for 30 years, and then he quit, and he works at a military contractor now. He doesn't really like it. I mean, he's ready to leave.
Okay.
And he's always had this dream of being a travel agent, and I don't know how to break to him.
Yes, no.
I told him like softly in many ways, like, oh, that's cool, but I just don't. Doesn't really exist anymore. It's just not
based on what I've seen in the east part of LA County. If he can speak fluent Chinese, he can make a business happen.
Yeah.
That's odd.
Dude, there's weirdly a large amount of travel agencies like are in like the east part of LA County, but they're like in Chinese. Like they're only in Chinese.
And this is what we call retraining for a new opportunity.
I see. I'll tell my dad to get started on Duolingo right now, Mandarin.
Yeah. Postal services dropped dramatically, but obviously the internet has created an unbelievable amount of jobs. E-commerce is absolutely massive. Obviously, Amazon doesn't have a great reputation, but 1.5 million people work for Amazon, 200K for Alibaba alone, millions and millions and millions across the world in logistics and delivery, right? Like arguably every industry in the world has been touched and largely benefited from e-commerce. Cybersecurity and IT, these are industries that are created because of the internet and computing. There's millions globally. Content creation, there are approximately 50 million content creators, at least globally, at least 2 million full-time. These numbers are very hard because so much of this is kind of interwoven. But if you think about some of the numbers, like TikTok alone has millions of people doing it professionally, right? So it's hard to exactly say, but the estimate is like it's at least 50 million worldwide who are making content to some degree professionally. That is wild. And that's all, again, that's 50 million people who weren't doing that 2 decades ago.
I think maybe it's time. You know, maybe a World War III is fine.
Well, you say that now, but think about how many people love driving Uber. Everybody loves Uber and gig platforms. Again, you can, obviously not all of this is sunshine and rainbows, but, objectively, demonstrably, there are many, many, many millions of jobs. And if you think about gig platforms like Fiverr or these other ones where people are just freelancing themselves for different roles. I mean, probably all three of us have worked with people who professionally make YouTube thumbnails or logos or do art.
Yeah, but I don't pay them though. It's like, for me, it's always like.
It's exposure.
Right.
Yeah.
An exposure-based economy.
What's the formula for adding exposure to GDP?
Do we have 34 trillion in exposure lying around?
Our debt?
Right, we can put it into the treasury.
What if Trump tweets out everyone we owe debt to for exposure? They call it even.
She.
I'm gonna make you a star.
We've got a slot in a new Mr. Beast video. And then interesting, one I thought was particularly interesting, even in traditional media, there was about 4.5 million people in the US who now are working TV, film, music that weren't there before because the massive amount of additional opportunity that has opened from the internet. Tens of millions of people now are working in media jobs globally that weren't there before. And I'll move through mobile devices pretty quick. This is another very recent tech change. It's the lost jobs from mobile phone. I'm gonna be honest. It's like people who made BlackBerry and Nokia, digital cameras. That used to be a thing that people would buy cameras. You don't do that anymore. You used to buy a Zune. You don't do that anymore. Taxi services. People used to have jobs making maps.
You ever heard about the taxi tragedy in New York? Do you know how you need to buy like a yellow taxi medallion?
Yeah.
And the prices of those like inflated like super, super high because like there's a limited amount of them to go out. And then a bunch of people bought at like peak market, basically. People that are putting like their life savings on the line, taking out loans to buy this yellow taxi medallion in New York. And then Uber picks up and the price of them plummets. But all those people are locked into the loan that they took out to buy the medallion. So just a crazy.
We need to add a medallion to become a content creator, and then that'll fix the problem for the future.
We need a limit.
We need a limit.
And who will hand out the medallions?
You?
Doug.
I thought you were going to say lemonade stand. Yeah, I guess it should be me. Yeah.
Take on the authority. Yeah.
So going through this quickly, the app economy, as it's labeled, like jobs and business and economic productivity that comes from apps on mobile devices is absolutely insane. And I'll briefly touch on it later. There's millions of jobs in the US that benefit from this alone, millions globally. Again, all of this kind of intertwines, right? So it's hard to exactly distinguish what is a phone job versus an internet job. But smartphone manufacturing, there's millions of people who do this worldwide in in wonderful conditions. Social media, again, like millions of TikTok alone, cloud service, there are millions of devs. Speaking as somebody who used to be a software developer and has dozens and dozens and dozens of friends in this industry, these are really high quality jobs. These didn't exist. And that's one of the things to note when thinking about job creation and destruction. Most of the jobs that are destroyed, not all, most jobs that are destroyed from tech trends are generally not as good as the ones that are created. Obviously, big asterisk there. Not everybody would agree with that if you're working in an Amazon sweat house or whatnot. But like programming, for example, is a really good industry to be in. And so overall, just some numbers on this that I think are pretty crazy. If you look at these trends, PC personal computers in the US, thanks to PC, estimates are we lost 4 to 6 million jobs and made 20 to 30 million, right? We're talking like a 20 million increase potentially. Globally, same thing, tens of millions of jobs increased. Going to internet, again, hard to exactly quantify. There we go. Millions of jobs destroyed because of the internet, right? And then we're making tens of millions. It continues to benefit essentially every business on the planet. Globally, hundreds of millions are likely either directly employed through internet services or benefiting from them. Mobile devices destroyed millions, made millions. And so what's also interesting about this is when these trends happen, generally they destroy a lot of jobs early in the wave, and then they create the jobs later. If you think about mobile devices, right? Like it's destroying Nokia and BlackBerry right away, but it took time for Uber to pick up, and it took time for TikTok. It took a decade, 2 decades for TikTok.
Right.
So generally the trend is the destruction happens quickly early on, and then the creation of jobs happens later. Quick other notes that we'll talk about. I'll get back to the desk. New tech obviously affects all industries. There's a McKinsey study that said the internet has created 2.6 jobs for every one destroyed. That's wild. Mobile apps account for 20% of all new US jobs from 2008 to 2022.
That's crazy.
Mobile apps are like crazy good at generating new jobs for Americans.
It's probably like Uber, right? It's like Uber and I'm assuming at 20. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, but if you also think about like every single business, banks, a huge portion of what they're doing with their energy resources staff is mobile
building
banking.
for mobile banking.
Right. There's so much that goes into mobile devices. It's not just, some guy made a meditation app, right? It's all of these things. It's games, it's gig economies. It's the fact that every single business also now has a major mobile component.
I wish Twitch would hire some of these people for their mobile app because it sucks.
Yeah. It's not. Well, we created some jobs there.
We created some jobs, not at Twitch.
Kind of a big fan of how you just have a 30% success ratio on loading the clip. Just I open a Twitch clip and it loads sometimes. It doesn't. That's kind of the
create
joy.
some new jobs. The new jobs will fix that.
Yeah, create some jobs.
Obviously, maybe we get into this in a future episode or now, but there's a lot of ethical ramifications to new technology. I'm simplifying this to just job creation and destruction for the sake of like narrowing the scope of this conversation. But obviously, if somebody in rural Brazil has access to resources, which I believe AI will do, that allows them to access businesses or opportunities that they couldn't before, I think the internet has largely been a massively positive thing for people around the world. There's also downsides, though. A lot of jobs have been shifting towards gig work, which, I think many people do not feel is nearly as sustainable. And locations of jobs shift as well, right? It's not like every job that's destroyed like grows in that same spot like a plant, right? In rural Arkansas,
and you might have roots or
them
whatever.
losing jobs in rural Arkansas, a lot of those jobs then go to Silicon Valley, right? So this is not evenly distributed. And I had some ideas, maybe AI future, there could be virtual worlds and experiences. Like we don't know what's going to happen with AI yet. I believe there will be crazy ass stuff. AI run public service sectors, imagining like traffic lights and utilities actually being managed by really smart AIs who optimize this, more scientists who can use AIs to run experiments, genetic engineering and customized medicines, like the healthcare industry being far more sophisticated with people, and cyberpunk where we all have cool ass fucking additions to our head and our face. If you think about this alone, dude, on a serious note, that is going to happen. And if you imagine
that's not good.
The number of industries and
I've seen that show before. I've seen that.
I didn't watch the end. I assume it's a happy ending.
All ends good.
If you think about the number of industries in the world that are around fashion and people expressing themselves in interesting ways, the millions of people who do little Etsy crafts, the millions of people working in fashion or hairstyling or tattoos, different ways to express yourself, and you imagine it in the future as we will get like essentially bionic parts of ourself, the amount of customization and flair and personalization. One of the things that I think is interesting, we all, laugh about the metaverse and stuff like that. But as virtual worlds become really, really sophisticated, people are going to do crazy stuff. And maybe there's going to be a whole industry where you manage a bar in a virtual world in a way that you couldn't before, right? So I really do believe that there's going to be enormous, crazy, different types of technologies and industries that we can't even imagine right now that come from AI, specifically as part of this product wave that will happen largely after the current wave of destruction. This is oversimplifying things, but I think it is very interesting. And now I will go back to the table and we'll talk. And
Okay.